Let's begin. Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are located right now. On behalf of the Research Institute for Peace and Security, or RIPS, we would like to extend our warm to all of you participating in this RIPS International Security Webinar 2025. Thank you very much for joining us out of your very busy schedule today. I am more than pleased to see a large number of guests from various parts of the globe. Welcome. Let me say a few words at the outset. RIPS is Japan's oldest independent think tank dedicated to security studies. RIPS turns 47 years old this October. RIPS hosted similar events either online or in person in this season several times in the recent past. Last month, we visited Warsaw and co-hosted an in-person seminar with the University of Warsaw. Today, as this is a webinar, we expect larger audience. Thank you very much for joining us. Today's topic is international security cooperation for the integrity in East Asia in the age of the great power rivalry. Almost 3 years have passed since Russia began to invade Ukraine. We can't foresee when and how it will end. The Russian invasion of Ukraine obviously has been swaying the entire rules-based international order. Russia even threatens to use nuclear weapons to deter NATO's direct involvement in the war. If the international community acquiesced in the blatant violation of established international order and international norm, similar violence would easily happen elsewhere, including East Asia. Japan's former Prime Minister Fumio Kishida often said, Ukraine today might be East Asia tomorrow. And NATO's former Secretary General Stoltenberg said in Tokyo 2 years ago, I quote, what is today could happen in East Asia tomorrow. And he also said that China's growing assertiveness and its coercive policies have consequences. Russia should not be underestimated either. Russia signed the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Pact with North Korea, and North Korea has been deploying its combat troops to help the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So, European security and Asian security are more connected than before. Russia is expected to rely more on nuclear forces, and as a result, it will further focus on the defense of the Sea of Okhotsk. Its strategic nuclear submarines operate. It will have a serious security ramification on East Asia and Japan too. Yesterday, we mainly discussed China's maritime expansion in the East and South China Sea and in the vicinity of Japan's Senkaku Islands in the closed session. Of course, Taiwan, which is located in the South China Sea and the East China Sea, is a focal point too. Just to recall, China's joint sword exercises surrounding Taiwan last year. More assertive operationally and also verbally. China is trying to alter the status quo by force and coercion. It is challenging and also the oneness of the norm which governs the sea. It is trying to challenge the rules-based international principle of the rule of law at sea. It's a serious concern for all of us today. However, it couldn't be addressed by any single country alone. International partnership with like-minded countries is a must. What is it today and what should it be like toward the future? That is what we must discuss today in this webinar. Indo-Pacific regional security architecture is not mature. Meanwhile, the US-centered alliances, the basis of the regional security, are more connected than ever before. For example, Australia, Japan, US partnership, Japan-Korea-US partnership, and Japan-Philippine-US partnership, but not fully integrated yet. A number of new initiatives, such as the Quad, are emerging. The Quad is expanding its functions, including the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness, or IPMDA, to work with regional partners to respond to humanitarian and natural disasters, and also combat IUU fishing. Measures on IUU fishing, I mean, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, is important in addressing Malaysia too. Also, we witness increasing engagement and attention of European countries and also NATO in the affairs of the region, even while Russia's war on Ukraine continues. Be viewed as one of them. As we discussed yesterday and well known in the discourse of the contemporary international community, East Asia is at the forefront of the US-China rivalry. The world is divided. There are some countries which are reluctant to make a binary choice. Of course, there are other countries, including Japan, which already made a choice, a strategic choice. Reflecting this reality, efforts to generate synergy of the said multilateral and unilateral partnerships are a challenge, but the efforts should be enhanced. We would like to provide some food for thought to tackle this challenge, focused on the agency, because East Asia is a large seascape, and we continue to grow up on water. In this public webinar, we would like to deepen the discussion with a wide range of audience. We have 4 terrific speakers. As time is very much limited, I can't afford to introducing each one of them in detail, but just briefly in speaking order. Dr. Celine Pajon of French Institute of International Relations, or Ifri, replacing Dr. Rajagopalan of India. Raji couldn't make it because something came up suddenly for her. It is unfortunate that we couldn't hear an Indian view, but it is very, very fortunate that we can hear a French view today. Thank you, Celine. And next, Dr. Sumathy of Malaysian, Maritime Institute of Malaysia. Sumathy, thank you very much for joining us today. And Professor James Kraska of US Naval War College. Thank you, James, as well. And also Admiral Katsuya Yamamoto of Sasakawa Peace Foundation of Japan. Thank you, Katsuya-san. Well, now, without further ado, let's hear the 4 presentations first. Each speaker has 12 minutes, maximum 15 minutes for initial remarks. So, Celine, could you go first? The floor is yours, all yours.
Thank you very much, Tokuchi-san. Thank you so much for the kind introduction and the invitation, and for this opportunity to talk a bit about European and French perspectives on the topic today. I would like first to remind that European and French interest in the Indo-Pacific is very much driven by concerns about the regional stability, or better said, regional instability or risk of instability. Europe is a big trade power, and we do have a lot of stakes in the sea lanes of communications there. So it's very important for Europeans, for French authority to keep these maritime routes open, free, and accessible to everybody. So France was the first country, European country, to adopt the Indo-Pacific strategy back in 2019. But since then, we've seen a lot of other European countries, such as Germany, Netherlands, Lithuania, Czech Republic, and others that had their own strategy, as well as Brussels. So the EU Indo-Pacific strategy was adopted in 2021. So one of the key factors is, as I said, trying to ensure the regional stability. And one key concern is about Chinese increasing influence and maritime expansions in the region, because there's action that's really concretely challenge the rules-based international order. And we've seen very worrying trends in recent years, with more acute tensions at sea and more risk of escalatory moves, and so on. And we've seen that in East China Sea, Taiwan Strait, of course, and South China Sea as well. As we know, China employs a salami slicing strategy. It's used gradual maritime expansion and hybrid warfare tactics to assert control, and this is particularly difficult to counter. It regularly is called into question and violate the law of the sea. So this is really a key concern for Europeans. Another important challenge that threaten territorial integrity, and you mentioned it, Tokuchi-san, is the competition for marine resources, especially the fish stocks. We know that they are being depleted because of overfishing, IUU fishing, and so on. So this is a very big issue in the region. Competition also for hydrocarbon or seabed minerals and so on. It will grow again in the future. It will raise more, put more pressure in case of maritime boundary disputes, and it will also escalate the risk of open conflict. With this in mind, what is France and Europeans' approach to the region? First, I would like to recall that France is a resident power of the Indo-Pacific. We have sovereign territories both in the Indian and Pacific Oceans, with a very big exclusive economic zone. It is the second largest in the world, and 90% of which is in the Indo-Pacific. So for France, protecting this area against predatory moves is top priority in the region. A cornerstone of France's approach to do that is the promotion of the rule of law, and particularly UNCLOS, the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. And I would like also to emphasize that France is not taking sides in territorial disputes, be it in East or South China Sea. It is really a principle-based approach. And Tokuchi-san, we refer to the interconnection of theater, mentioning Prime Minister Kishida's famous allocution about Ukraine today could be East Asia tomorrow. But I would like also to recall back in 2016, we had the former French Minister of Defense, Jean-Yves Le Drian, who said at the Shangri-La dialogue that the European must be, take interest in South China Sea, because what is going on in the South China Sea could also happen elsewhere in the world, in the Atlantic or Mediterranean theater. So it works both ways. So we saw that Paris has taken a very firm stance against the violation of international law through different means, diplomatic measures, such as issuing different note verbal to the UN, for example. And of course, we are sending regular and consistent naval deployment to the region in South China Sea, China Sea, Taiwan Strait, And we've been doing that for more than 10 years now. Actually, right now, the big French aircraft carrier group is deployed in East Asia. And I think it demonstrates the importance of upholding the rule of law, securing the sea lane, and keeping strategic straits open in the region. So sometimes we do hear some comments about the fact that French or European maritime deployment in Asia remains limited, and I'm fully aware of that, and I concur with that. But nevertheless, I believe that this deployment have some important strategic functions, because they are signaling political commitment, and they are demonstrating solidarity with partners in the region. And I think in the, trying to maybe not deter, but to prevent any escalatory move, this is still a very important way to do it. Beyond military presence, France and Europe contribute to maritime security and contribute to help their partners in the region to maintain their territorial integrity by trying to improve their capacities in terms of maritime domain awareness. For example, we've seen several important European initiatives in the region, like CRIMARIO, which is very much complementary. If we compare with the IPMDA, it's different systems. And also the EU initiative started in the Western Indian Ocean, an area that is not covered by the US Indo-Pacific strategy. So I think what EU and Europeans and Americans can do is very much complementary. So we are doing that. MDA, assistance to enforce law against IUU fishing. And I think another key point is that we are trying to help our partners to better counter hybrid threats, such as disinformation campaigns or interference that challenge national sovereignty as well. And you may know that France has issues with some external actors, such as Azerbaijan, who are playing their game in New Caledonia to weaken France's sovereignty. So, and to end my presentation, so in the age of great power competitions, what role of European and France? What can we do? I believe that, as you said, the security architecture in East Asia is not mature yet. We've seen a lot of limitations regarding what ASEAN can do, for example, to negotiate a code of conduct. We've seen a lot of minilaterals complementing the US alliance system. But still, the geopolitical competitions leads to a suboptimal coordination in tackling these important security challenges. And I think in this context, France and Europe has an important role to play, because EU is a normative power. So it could really help to uphold the international law and counter the growing influence of revisionist states such as China and Russia. And it is all the more important for the EU to contribute more, as we see Trump administration also calling into questions the liberal international order, and at some point through a very transactional approach, also weakening international principles. So just to end with that, I would like to say that the EU and France, the EU could play a very important role at least, but we must also recognize that EU is internally divided, politically weakened, and still very much dependent on the US for its own security. So there are obvious limitations on what we can do. So I believe the key is really to work together, to work on a cooperation between third powers or middle powers. You take the terminology that you prefer, like-minded countries, to try to increase their leverage vis-à-vis the big powers that are trying to bully more and more other countries that are not so powerful. So I will leave it here. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm waiting for your questions.
Celine, thank you very much for your great talk, and also thank you very much for keeping time. Then we can be very much rules-based. Thank you. Thank you very much. Celine told us about the big willingness of EU and France to contribute to the peace and stability in East Asia, even though France and EU have their own limitation. And also, we can fully understand that France is a resident power of the Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much. Next speaker is Sumathy, right? I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, that's right. Sumathy, so you have 12 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, RIPS and Tokochi-san in particular for the invitation. And I think the international security webinar, it's really timely. And once again, thank you for having me as to provide a perspective here. And I would begin by strongly agreeing with the presentation by Dr. Celine that, who talk about France Indo-Pacific strategy. Just for your information, Malaysia has been a participant of the France Indo-Pacific Security Initiative. In fact, one of NIMA's representative attended the Security Forum in France last November. So I do think that we have similar security concerns, and we are part of the like-minded country. But having said that, my presentation today will focus about responses from Southeast Asia on maritime security in the era of the age of great power rivalry. So I will briefly talk about what the new Trump's the administration, the new US policy, which is grounded on three basic principles: safe, stronger, and prosperous America. And in order to pursue this effectively this foreign policy, the US have to reprioritize some of its national interests and engagement with the external countries, and it's also its global posture. So what does this mean to Southeast Asia, in particular in the maritime context? And secondly, how this answer really relies primarily on how much the US will fend off its strategic rival as far as the East China Sea or South China Sea is concerned is definitely China. And will the South China Sea remain a US strategic security priority? And this global posture by the US and China's rivalry, how does it impact on Southeast Asian country? So China's principal approach remain unchanged even with the new Trump's administration. China, to its statement, have stated that it requests mutual respect and a win-win cooperation, and wanting to find the right formula to get along with the US. However, China has not stated what is the right formula. But looking at the deeper US-China rivalry, the DeepSeek AI release in January 2025 is another surprise, signaling the Chinese government's strong effort to up its ante against US innovation and technology, breaking the assumptions that China has limitation on science, technology, and artificial intelligence. The emergence of low-priced Chinese AI has actually threatened the Western dominance of AI, bringing tech shares like NASDAQ dropping into 35% and prompting Google, Microsoft, Meta, and re-strategizing to remain competitive. So on the other hand, the US competitive policy regarding economic interests vis-a-vis China is quite clear, but not on the strategic front. So there's little have been said on Indo-Pacific strategy. So this is actually, we believe that it is the peak of great power rivalry. And the Southeast region is living in an era marked by a complex interplay of cooperation and division. The security of Europe, as mentioned yesterday, and also earlier by the Dr. Celine, the Europe situation, including Ukraine, the Middle East crisis, is increasingly becoming more divided and not really interconnected. So the situation in the East China Sea and the South China Sea is a critical concern, not only for the Indo-Pacific, but also for Southeast Asia. While President Trump wants to end the war between Russia and Ukraine, there's no clear policy outline on Asia's maritime domain. So I believe that this is an advantage to China that is more prepared to pursue an affirmative action in the South China Sea while keeping the US busy with trade war. So this might also widen the power vacuum in the Indo-Pacific region, especially in the South China Sea. So, of course, South China Sea is very important for trade. Remarkably, 1/3 of the maritime trade transit through the South China Sea. It's very important not only for the Indo-Pacific powers, but also we are the claimants in the South China Sea. And as far as the claimants is concerned, I think the Philippines is most vulnerable against China. And the Philippines is also taking multiple action or multiple security posture and defense. For example, starting negotiation with New Zealand to face the Chinese threat. So for the US and also other Indo-Pacific power, including Japan, France, EU, and so on, ensuring freedom of navigation and overflight is essential. So the US Secretary of Defense said that the US will collaborate closely with its allies in the Indo-Pacific to deter Chinese military aggression. At the same time, US has also cut its foreign aid funds to prioritize its national interests. So this action seems to force maybe its allies who has a deeper stake in the Indo-Pacific to take more burden in like Japan, Australia, and the US to absorb the security assistance in the Indo-Pacific region. For Japan, Japan has been persisting in its free and open Indo-Pacific policy and opposes any unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force or coercive action that can heighten tension. So in this regard, I think as far as the East China Sea and the South China Sea concerned, Japan has to absorb more security posture if the US really minimize its effort in the South China Sea. So turning back to Malaysia, Malaysia is the chairman for ASEAN in 2025. Malaysia will continue to promote thematic engagement with the Indo-Pacific and Quad partners. The focus has been, continuously, there's no change. Malaysia has been promoting risk reduction and promoting rule of law and enhancing inclusivity for maritime cooperation. So Malaysia has a vested interest in maintaining a peaceful, open and stable South China Sea. And Malaysia has been consistent, as I mentioned. It is commitment to reduce and strongly advocate for dispute to be addressed through peaceful platforms and diplomatic channel. So Malaysia, through its many formal and informal statements, have proposals to any escalation of tension or the use of force as reaffirmed by our Prime Minister. In fact, in the Parliament, he has stated that Malaysia opposes to any use of force. So as Malaysia assume a pivotal role as a chairman of ASEAN, Malaysia wants to also play an active role in ensuring that the South China Sea maintain its status quo as a sea of peace for trade. This has also stated in the recent retreat just last month in Malaysia. So Malaysia has been chairing ASEAN on the theme of inclusivity and sustainability. Malaysia aims to stir the region towards a constructive and cooperative approach to the South China Sea. So Malaysia wants to advance negotiation on the code of conduct, although there's many critics on the validity or even the effective use of the COC. I think being a chair, Malaysia's hold responsibility to ensure that the discussion on the COC moves on the right direction, according to the Declaration of Conduct of Parties in 2002. So COC will still form a vital framework to build trust and uphold international law and a political tool to prevent conflicts. So Malaysia also will focus on the centrality of ASEAN and expected to navigate the challenges in the South China Sea with the focus on three main guiding principles, which is adherence to the international law, regional unity among ASEAN member states, and also inclusivity in managing great power rivalry. So Malaysia have to take this three guiding principle because Malaysia clearly understood that the stakes are too far high for division and aggression. So in conclusion, in the new age of great power rivalry, it is certainly will impact Southeast Asian countries ranging from economic, security, and strategic balance. We discussed about strategic balance during the yesterday's session. Strategic balance include political engagement, military engagement, and also cooperation on dealing with other maritime security issues. But we still think that the new administration will focus on the trade war against China and also maybe other countries like what Trump announced on the tariff against Mexico, Canada, and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, China will continue to build on its strategic, military, and diplomatic engagement in the South China Sea, and China may gain more advantage on security, maritime security in the East China Sea and also in the South China Sea because of the US current administration. So with that, I will just pause my initial remarks and I look forward for the engaging question and answer session. Thank you.
All right, Sumathy, thank you very much for keeping time. Thank you very much. It is very much rules-based. And also, Sumathy does the position of Malaysia. And also you hit a very important point, policy orientation of the United States under the Trump administration, and also the prospect of or the significance of COC. And also, you referred to the importance of the centrality of ASEAN. So you hit the very important points relevant to today's discussion. Thank you very much. And hearing Sumathy's presentation. So the floor is yours, James. Please, you have around 12 minutes.
Thank you, Takuchi-san, for the kind invitation, and thank you for the Research Institute for Peace and Security for involving me in this important program. I have a little bit of a different perspective, and I'm glad that we have an opportunity to sort of look at all different dimensions of the security problem. My approach is to assess the regional strategic environment, which in my view involves the South China Sea, the East China Sea, and explore how the rules-based regional order can be strengthened or enhanced. Because East Asia is a maritime geography, the regional system of power is expressed through the maritime domain, and the rules that govern it are derived from the international law of the sea, international law more generally. My view is that the strategies of the democracies, the United States, Japan, Australia, and others, have not effectively restrained China's challenge to the rules-based order in East Asia. What we have been doing has not been working. And so I think that the new US administration is an opportunity to take a different approach. The challenges are in the South China Sea, the East China Sea, as well as the Yellow Sea, and of course, stretching all the way to the Bonin Islands of Japan, the US position in Guam, even out to Hawaii, and the states and territories of Oceania, Australia, and New Zealand are all affected by Chinese power projection in the maritime domain. So I would view these in the threat vectors in four different lines of effort for Beijing. The dashed line claim in the South China Sea, undermining the rights of Vietnam, Malaysia, the Philippines, Brunei, and Indonesia, which doesn't want to call itself part of the contest, but absolutely is, because of course the 9-dash line appears to claim territory owned under the governance of Indonesia in their EEZ off the Natuna Islands. The second is encroachment of Japan's territorial sea and unlawful Chinese baselines around the Senkaku Islands and the challenge of sovereignty over the islands. The third line of effort is pressure against Korea and the EEZ in the Yellow Sea. And then the fourth is the continuous campaign in the waters surrounding Taiwan. These are the four lines of effort. So my view is that everyone concerned about China should view the new US administration as a return to matching ends and means, a morning in America on the order of the Reagan administration in 1981. So I'm actually very hopeful. I'm not pessimistic. I actually think that the new US administration is the only possibility that we all have, including states such as Vietnam or Malaysia, the only hope or opportunity that we have to be able to withstand Chinese pressure. The United States and Japan are the bulwark upon which all of the states that I just mentioned depend throughout all of these areas, all the way to the South Pacific. The new US administration is meeting with the senior Japanese counterparts. In the message to the force just about a week or so ago, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth stated that the US Department of Defense will work with allies and partners to deter aggression in the Indo-Pacific by Communist China, and we stand by our allies. There's no more important ally than Japan in this regard, both for the United States as well as all of the third-party beneficiaries that are made more secure by the US-Japan alliance. So Hegseth met with the Japan Defense Minister, Nakatani Gen, and the two leaders committed to deepening cooperation and strengthening deterrence and advanced a shared vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific. The United States, Japan, and other key allies, including Australia, must adopt a more comprehensive and coordinated plan to counter Chinese aggression. Revisiting the concept of linkage that the United States effectively employed against the Soviet Union during the Cold War, my view is that allied states and the United States should coordinate their China strategies, and indeed, tariffs is a key component of this. My view is not just for the United States, but also other countries, Japan, even Australia, and other countries ought to begin the process of reviewing their economic relationship with China. The United States diplomats have also met with their Japanese counterparts. Secretary of State Rubio has also met with Japan Foreign Minister Takeshi Iwai, so both the Secretaries of Defense and Secretaries of State or Ministry of Foreign Affairs have met, and I think that this is that we ought to be optimistic about this. I would focus on to keep it simple, I would focus on four policies or lines of effort in what used to be called the DIME, the diplomatic, information, military, and economic. If we go back to just the basics, Japan and the United States should coordinate their efforts, in my view, in every UN agency, beginning with the US position as a permanent member of the Security Council. Japan should visibly serve as a +1 shadow member of the Security Council through the US permanent seat, especially on matters dealing with China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. This would telegraph to the world that the United States and Japan are the key military relationship for global security. In my view, more important than the US position in NATO. Furthermore, Japan and the United States should develop positions and talking points in international forum that they represent as coordinated during their not just bilateral engagements with themselves, but in multilateral engagements with other partners and even against potential adversaries. And these efforts would underscore that Japan and the United States form a solid bloc that is contending, when states are contending with one of them, they are actually drawing both into the equation. Furthermore, I think that it's long overdue that the United States re-recognize Japanese sovereignty over the Senkaku Islands. The US administration so far recognized that the new administration recognized, as previous administrations have done, that the Senkakus fall within the security architecture. I would go further. I would say that the United States had recognized sovereignty over the Senkaku Islands when the United States occupied Okinawa for several decades after the war, and that we have abandoned that view in order to accommodate China during the Cold War. And now it's time to revise that position, because I believe that the United States' attempt to be neutral or to somehow be an honest broker has not contributed to security and deterrence. It's undermined our position. So I would do that. With regard to information, the I element of DIME, Japan and the United States should advance information narratives in coordination sometimes with third states or organizations, especially NATO and the European Union, when it concerns China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, and the threat that they are posing to international peace and security. It is remarkable that the United States and apparently other countries have tended to want to sweep under the rug violations of international law and norms committed by these states. The United States appears to have been just as guilty as other countries in doing so. And while you may be able to have some kind of temporary pause in tensions, in the long run, I think that is counterproductive. So my view is that US and Japanese narratives, such as the free and open Indo-Pacific, should be advanced in a purposeful way, and also that our societies should deliberately root out Chinese malign influence in their media and in their civil society. For example, like the Philippines has recently done in arresting Chinese nationals that are meddling in Philippine politics. And these are all well known. I think this this group is very familiar with Chinese infiltration of our societies through United Front and other efforts. On the military side, the United States should quietly encourage Japan and others to increase the defense budgets, especially for the JMSDF and Japan Air Self-Defense Force, and broaden defense cooperation to include intermediate range ballistic missiles, hypersonic missile technology, and their defense. Since 2006, the United States and Japan have jointly developed and produced the SM-3 Block 2, and we are now embarked on glide phase interceptor cooperative development to develop GPI counter hypersonic capability, which is even more important. I would invite Japan into the AUKUS submarine technology agreement, possibly leading to nuclear submarines in the JMSDF fleet, as well as, at a minimum, just sharing the undersea warfare technology. I would also, if it's still meaningful, revisit the F-22 decision for Japan. Now, all of these efforts, in my view, are undergirded by economic power, and this is why I'm actually quite optimistic about the U.S. administration. I understand that there is sort of a veneer of threat, especially for smaller countries, but actually the United States can only serve to counter China if the U.S. economy is strong. And what the United States risks right now is becoming like the British Empire, slowly dissolving into a medium or even low medium power. And so the only way that the United States, Japan, and all the countries that I mentioned, all the way down to the small island developing states of Oceania, the only chance that any of these states have to counter China is if the United States has a very strong economy. Now, remember, 10 years ago, everyone talked about how the Chinese economy would overtake the United States. But since then, that has not happened. In fact, it's possible that U.S. economic growth can be even higher than Chinese economic growth. The United States, Japan, European Union, and China all face economic malaise. And I believe that the new administration is an opportunity for the United States to break this cycle and to serve as an example for other countries to reform their economies in order to have robust economic growth. So in 2018, President Trump began to impose tariffs on some Chinese goods, and President Biden continued those policies. And now President Trump has imposed 10% tariffs across the board on Chinese goods. These actually are quite modest compared to the tariffs that China, tariffs or non-tariff barriers that China imposes on the United States. And indeed, let's not forget that the European Union imposes on American goods. So while we should work toward reducing trade barriers among ourselves, I think that the United States, Japan, and the European Union have large markets that China has accessed and indeed raided and dumped goods in. And these three centers of power, these three large economies, ought to coordinate and raise tariffs and trade barriers against Chinese goods. The United States and Japan should lead the developed world in resetting the scales to ensure their industries are protected and that Chinese industry is diminished. China is caught in a significant economic slowdown, a debt spiral, and potential deflationary market. And I think that we should accelerate these issues. The United States should and can aim for 4 to 5% economic growth, as we had under President Ronald Reagan, and hopefully they would be joined by Europe and Japan, which also have ought to increase innovation and market growth. These are the basis for military power ultimately. So in conclusion, I would say the United States has an opportunity to avoid the imperial overstretch that brought down the British Empire. The new administration has moved with a shock and awe to get the U.S. domestic house in order, eliminate wasteful spending, and avoid involvement in every tertiary struggle on the planet that drains national power. So, for example, the U.S. Agency for International Development over the past week or so has had its spending frozen.
James, I'm very sorry to bother interrupt you, but could you wrap up your presentation in 1 minute?
Sure. So USAID has had its spending frozen, spends more than the Department of State and the CIA together. Numerous examples of this kind of spending are things like funding the Wuhan laboratory, which produced COVID-19, paying for solar-powered streetlights in Afghanistan, paying opium farmers in Afghanistan to grow corn. They take the money to grow the corn, they still grow opium. Whatever your political position, my view is that these coordinated dime efforts to get our budgets under control and to strengthen our economies and our military forces will enhance the security. These are designed to synchronize the Japan-US alliance as an all-spectrum partnership, and all states for at least half of the world depend on its success. Thank you.
All right. James, thank you very much for your very much candid view, and also thank you very much for sharing your positive view on the U.S. engagement in the international affairs and also in this region, and also your remarks about the importance of the Japan-U.S. alliance is very well taken from our perspective. Thank you very much. And now, Admiral Yamamoto, the floor is yours. Oh, by the way, I'd like to tell the audience one important thing. If you have any questions to the panelists, please write your questions in the Q&A using Q&A function. We already have one question in the Q&A box, so I think that all the panelists can read this question. But anyway, I'd like to tell the audience that you should write your question in the using Q&A function, please. Admiral Yamamoto, thank you very much for waiting. The floor is all yours.
Okay, sir. The President, Mr. Tokuchi-san, and the Research Institute for Peace and Security, thank you very much again for giving the opportunity to speak about our security and sovereignty. So today, I would like to speak as an old sailor view of these issues. The common understanding in our international community is that the concept of the sovereignty over the ocean differ from that over the land. The lack of the visualized national borders surrounding islands is a salient feature of island territories. These islands possess a territorial ocean defined by the 12 nautical miles extended beyond which lies the domain of the international waters. These maritime domains are critically important global commons that not only marine resources, fish, oil, but also the sea line communications and submarine cable that maintain global supply chains and the digital network of the world. Notably, China, a historically land power, has exhibited a growing ambition to expand its influence to the maritime domain. This endeavor is characterized by a pursuit of domain dominance akin to its approach on land, whether intentionally or inadvertently. In recent years, China has embarked on the significant initiative to transform the waters west side of or within the First Island chain into the inland waters. Within the First Island chain, there are the Eastern Sea, including the Senkaku Islands of Japan, and the South China Sea. There are the islands and reefs over which various countries claim sovereignty or jurisdiction. China's strategic objective is to incorporate the islands within its like a weighty Chinese chest, thereby proliferating effective sovereignty over them. The primary actor in the Chinese effort to establish its domain in the First Island chain is the China Coast Guard, I believe, Zhongguo Haijin. This is particularly salient considering that 2018 reorganization underscored the China Coast Guard and its parent organization, the China People's Armed Police Force, increasing the militarization. Consequently, the China Coast Guard has undergone a transformation, evolving from a law enforcement organization into a formidable military force, so-called the Second Chinese Navy. The China Coast Guard has already demonstrated its capacity to execute all its missions independently without requiring support from the PLA Navy. The scope and the scale of the China Coast Guard have expanded to the point that its now perform has surpassed not only law enforcement capability, but also the naval fighting capability against the neighboring countries, except for Japan Maritime Power, including the JMSDF and the Japanese Coast Guard. But it's only a matter of time. The China Coast Guard is overseen by the People's Armed Police Force. This is a domestic military force dedicated to combating domestic hostility against such as hostility against the communist regime in China. Therefore, the distinction between the law enforcement and the national defense operation are ambiguous. The strategic mindset of the China Coast Guard, which is under the command of the People's Armed Police Force, mirrors that of the domestic military force. Consequently, the distinction between the law enforcement operation of the China Coast Guard and its national defense operation is not discernible. China Gray Zone operation can attribute to this phenomenon, I believe. The second actor is Chinese fishing vessels and fishermen. The aggressive harassment against the fishing vessel and offshore vessel of neighboring countries by Chinese fishing vessels has recently become too much to ignore. Reports have also emerged of damage and cutting of submarine cable in the waters surrounding Taiwan. A significant numbers of the Chinese fishermen appear to lack a fundamental understanding of the basic seamanship principles, including the recognition that the ocean is a global commons and that there exist established international rules and orders for its use, which must be adhered to. US security think tank, very famous think tank CSIS survey, the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative, and other sources has revealed that many of the activities of Chinese fishing vessels are under the control of the Chinese authorities, national authorities. However, in response to this, last December, I was invited by the Chinese PLA authority. I visited to Beijing and discussed about these issues with the PLA high-rank officers and experts They denied the existence of the militia activities by fishermen and stated that Chinese fishermen's phenomenon activities were carried out of the fishermen's own free will. China never mobilized the fishermen as a militia. I cannot believe it. If this response is accurate, right, it suggests that Chinese authorities may face challenges in regulating the Chinese fishermen who engage in illegal activities. To ensure safe and stable the ocean, which is our global commons, it is the imperative for countries to collaborate to respond decisively to the illegal actions of the Chinese fishing vessel. It is not acceptable for single country to monopolize and make into the internal waters the global commons that are East and South China Sea. For this reason, we need our international community need to work together to oppose the Chinese internalization of these waters, not by single country, but by combined, much-layered cooperative framework, I believe. When engaging the countries of the South China Sea, it would be advantageous for Quad countries, which possess advanced naval and law enforcement capability to leverage their established network. To achieve this objective, it is imperative that each country utilize its distinct strengths and collaborate with other like-minded members and allies. For instance, for example, the Quad, the Australia possesses historical experience with the Southeast countries, such as FPDA. Japan, my country, also has a wealth of the experience to share with the coastal countries of the South China Sea, including the safety of the Malacca Strait and support for the capacity building of the Coast Guard forces of the Southeast Asia's countries. A similar situation is observed with India, which in this January, last month, reached the agreement with Indonesia regarding the new security cooperation. Among the nations of the South China Sea, there is a wealth of experience, a very fruitful experience to be shared, including the recap, Malaysia Strait patrols, and eyes in the sky. A crucial aspect of this endeavor is establishment of a multi-faceted cooperative network encompassing the maritime power, including the navies, coast guards, and other agencies, to forestall the escalation of the armed conflict. It is imperative that the maritime law enforcement agency of each country confront the Chinese Coast Guard, which refers itself as the Chinese Coast Guard. However, given the Coast Guard dual nature, Chinese Coast Guard dual nature, characterized by the ambiguity between law enforcement and the military defense behaviors, tiered the system of the law enforcement agency and the military is imperative. This system should be complemented and crossed over by a multi-faced interwoven framework that facilitate a seamless response. This is my speaking. I stopped my speech. Thank you.
Well, Admiral Yamamoto, thank you very much for your talk. And you touched upon the dual missions of China Coast Guard and also the roles of Chinese fishermen or maritime militia force. These various actors of Chinese maritime expansion should be more highlighted, I think. So your talk about these actors is very important. And also, the seamless response or whole of government approach to security. That's a very important point. Thank you very much for mentioning it. Well, we have around 25 minutes for Q&A session, and we already have, let's see, two or three questions. Our first question from Mr. Raymond Rementila from the Philippines. Does Japan and the USA have a plan to invest more in the Philippines for defense? Does Japan will support the Philippines if mutual defense treaty with the USA of the Philippines takes effect? So probably to naval officers, Katsuya-san and James, could you respond to this question first? Yes, Yamamoto-san, please.
Thank you very much for the question. I think, of course, the Japanese government may support to the Philippine and the U.S. alliance securities effort. However, so the on the other hand, it is a little bit difficult to directly military support, because for the not only Philippines but also our country Japan is the facing the front line of the that kind of the situation. So it is too much for our capability, I think. Is it correct, that James?
So, Admiral Yamamoto, yeah, so I actually think that this question, I mean, appreciate the question very much. Look, it's tactical and it's meaningless unless the United States and Japan have escalation dominance. And there's an open question as to whether we do. And what this means is that China has such an overmatch in ballistic missiles, hypersonic glide vehicles, anti-ship cruise missiles, that of course the US and Japan are going to help the Philippines, but this is a tactical issue. What really the deep concern is at the high end, because even if you get the tactical issue and address it, if you can't dominate at the high end, then everything is lost. The Philippines does not stand a chance. You can sell the Philippines 200 cruise missiles, but if the US and Japan can't dominate at the hypersonic glide vehicle level and in outer space, then the Philippines and everybody else is exposed. So this is, it's not a good situation. And this is why I emphasized the very strategic, beginning with US-Japan partnership at the very high end.
All right, thank you. Next question. Actually, two questions from a professor of Meiji University. And the first question is about the NATO cooperation, academic cooperation between NATO and other allies on the Chinese historical claims, I think, so probably, Celine and James, can you answer this question? And also his second question is about the US strategy, US naval strategy and some other ones. Anyway, James and Celine, can you, answer these questions?
Yeah, I can try. I'm not really familiar with any academic cooperation within NATO, but I can refer to NATO Strategic Communication Center of Excellence that is based in Riga. and is looking at the information, the disinformation strategies, interference, mostly by Russia, but also by China. So when I am just looking at the website right now, actually I can see some report titled Arctic Narratives and Political Values, Arctic State, China, NATO, and the EU. So I see some, on Russia's information influence operation in the Nordic Baltic region and so on. So I think there's something to do, maybe in terms of cooperation with between NATO and AP4 countries within this Center of Excellence to exchange views, listen, learns, and information about what Russia and China are doing and how they are trying to back their claim by developing a historical narrative and so on.
James?
Thank you. I would just add to that European scholars and American scholars already have been challenging those claims. I would say at the diplomatic level, both countries have been a little reticent because of the economic relationship. And so, you've heard my initial remarks, which is that this has been counterproductive and that European diplomats ought to be as adamant about these issues as they have been on the Russia issue. And they haven't been, and I don't think Americans have been either. So I think there's lots of work for everyone to do on this score. With regard to the other question about Central Asia, obviously that's an adjunct of this question. And what it requires is the strong centers of democracy, European Union, NATO, Japan, and the United States, to be positioned to challenge and to hold the line on Russia and China. And I think Central Asia is a lesser included part of that.
All right. Next question is addressed to Admiral Yamamoto. What is your opinion on, I'm sorry. What is your opinion on how Prime Minister Ishiba will continue the various maritime or military capability building programs with Southeast Asian nations, especially through the official security assistance framework? Admiral Yamamoto?
Yes, sir. So my question is very simple. So the Ishiba administration maintain the policy, defense and diplomatic policy, maintain the policy of the former Kishida's administration. So including the OSA. So this is one point. And the second one is I do not think so. The Trump administration stop the support to the Indo-Pacific area for preventing the Chinese activities. So however, so if the Trump administration supporting the speed was down, so the Japan I believe the Japan covered the Trump covered the these capacity supporting the capacity building. This is my answer. Thank you.
All right. Any other question from the audience? No questions? Oh, another question. From France. I'm not sure to whom this question addressed, but do you think that deterrence strategies and particularly denial strategy are efficient for deterring Chinese operations in Indo-Pacific? Can anyone answer this question?
I'm glad to take a stab at it. Admiral Yamamoto, I don't know if you or anybody else has thoughts first. I'll defer if you do. So yeah, go ahead, Celine, and then I'll be glad to go after you.
No, I just wanted to say, please do. If I have something to add, but I'm not sure. So,
well, thank you very much for the question. So my view would be that there is a strategy, but this deterrence is capability and will. It's fine to have a strategy or a policy. The United States and Europe are really good at generating paperwork. The question is, are we good at generating actual capabilities in the fleet and in the field? And are we capable of drawing the line on exercising will? And so this is where I think the challenge is. Are they able to do so? I guess I'm not optimistic about the trend over the past 15 or 20 years. I'm somewhat optimistic about the new administration, and hopefully that will help to strengthen not just the United States, but also its partners in Europe and Japan.
All right. Well, another question. It's addressed to Celine, right? Since New Caledonia got brought up, what collaborations are possible for joint work between France, Japan, and other East Asian nations on combating disinformation campaigns?
Yes, I think that's a very important topic. There is several ways that we can work together. I think the first, there are several channels and several places, several forums in which we can gather. I think first is the importance to recognize this challenge, and first also to be able to exchange the information about what each country is actually experiencing, because a lot of challenges is about access to information and properly understand what's going on in each country. So at least if we can find some ways to gather and to exchange this information and to learn about each other, about the best way to counter it, that would be a big progress, I would say. So the NATO Center of Excellence is one way, maybe, between NATO countries and AP4, but there's also some other ASEAN centers, institution in which I think you can find some good places to work on these too, and maybe also by including some countries like China, which would be interesting to work also with a Chinese counterpart, discussing this issue and challenging them actually regarding this kind of practices.
All right. New question has just come in. It's addressed to Sumathy. One reason why China has been aggressive in the South China Sea is because the ASEAN is divided. What do you think could be a point of convergence that could rally all Southeast Asian nations, particularly those involved, and address China's aggression? This is a very interesting question, and actually I'd like to ask you the same question. So, Sumathy, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And why do we think China is aggressive in the South China Sea? Precisely because China has a stake, and China is claiming the South China Sea in entirety through its 9-dash line. And so why China is aggressive militarily, I think it has been stated in many official documents of Chinese white papers and Chinese foreign ministry, and also the president's statements that South China Sea is very critical for China's sovereignty and sovereign interests, and China's South China Sea is considered one of the red lines of China's defense. And this also relates, perhaps I can just comment a bit of the earlier question as to whether the anti-access and area denial strategy would be able to deter China. I think the US precisely came up with the A2AD strategy in response to counter China's layer defense in the first island chain and the second island chains, and that would accumulate to China becoming a military power or maritime power, China's maritime strategy, by 2040, and, becoming a naval power in 2050. But in my opinion, I think the A2AD strategy have not been able to really deter the aggressive China. In fact, it has made the China behave more aggressive in terms of its military operation and assertiveness vis-a-vis the South China Sea. So on the question of whether Southeast Asian countries or ASEAN is divided on the South China Sea, it's not actually a division in ASEAN. I think Southeast Asian countries and ASEAN have very truthful and faithful response as to maintain the peace and stability in Southeast Asian region. But of course, the South China Sea South China Sea claims overlaps with Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, and also China, and so on. So as far as the national interest is concerned, different countries have different priorities on as to how they deal with their immediate territories and sovereign interests and sovereign rights. So Malaysia has its sovereign rights. Malaysia would like to, explore and exploit its resources in the South China Sea, and Malaysia's priority is different vis-a-vis the South China Sea as opposed to the Philippines' interest or the Vietnam's interest. And definitely in the question of convergence, as I mentioned earlier, the peace and stability is the point of convergence that Southeast Asian countries, especially Malaysia, wants to pursue. And I think, although, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, the COC or the DOC may not be the ideal solution, but the coastal countries, and especially Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Philippines, can work on other converging issues such as law enforcement and dealing with other maritime security issues through cooperation among the coast guards, through cooperation on, among agencies like the fisheries and so on, to deal with South China Sea maritime issues.
All right. Thank you very much. Two more questions. The first question is also addressed to Sumathy. The current Malaysian administration believes in compartmentalizing the South China Sea claims, given the trade and investment ties with China. Does this risk creating a credibility gap with Malaysia's actions on either subject?
So,
Sumathy?
compartmentalizing the South China Sea is not Malaysia's policy. I think Malaysia has been consistent in dealing with South China Sea issues. Malaysia's policy has been to abide by the rule of law and through diplomatic approach. So Malaysia is a small country, and there are some limitations as to how we can approach the South China Sea issues. And we don't have a treaty alliances, military alliances with any countries. So our foremost approach to deal with the might of China, or the Chinese posture in the South China Sea, has to be first through diplomatic effort, and but that does not stop or limit our defense on our sovereign rights and sovereign claims in the South China Sea. Malaysia have military stations operating. Malaysia have law enforcement agencies that continue to enforce its law, and Malaysia have naval presence to deter any intrusion, illegal activities, and also to shadow off. So Malaysia have prioritized its approach in the South China Sea, and I think, as I mentioned earlier, the diplomatic approach comes first, law enforcement, and also securing our area within our jurisdiction is the priority.
All right. Thank you, Sumathy. And the final, probably this will be the final question. The final questions comes from Renato. It's addressed to James and Katz. It's about Typhoon launchers. So, the Admiral Yamamoto and Professor Kraska, each of you has 2 minutes to answer Renato's questions. So, who goes first? Okay, Yamamoto-san, go ahead. 2 minutes.
Sorry. Thank you, Renat. It's very good questions. I totally agreed with Renat's comment. So this is the good opportunity, good timing for the president perform our trilateral cooperation against China. This is I believe promote the tri or multilateral joint exercise more and more. I think. Thank you.
All right, James.
Thank you also, Renato, for the question. So I'll tell you, I mean, these are to help to solve some of the imbalance. It's the same imbalance that NATO faced with the Soviet Union with the SSN-25 during the early 1980s. There's just an overmatch in intermediate range missiles, and China has the most active missile program in the world. So I would go even farther. I would say that the mid-range capability missile in Luzon that was temporarily positioned there, that's more of a long-term fix. Mid-range missiles, the Typhoon has a range of about 500 kilometers. The mid-range capability is about 1,500 kilometers, and you need lots of them, perhaps in Luzon, although I don't know if the area is suitable, but in other areas throughout the region. This is the only way that there is a balance of power. In my view right now, there's not a balance of power, and we are all at risk of Chinese domination because of it.
All right. Well, time is up, so I have to close today's session. Although I hope that the audience has more questions. Actually, it's very, very difficult for me to wrap up this session in one word. So I gave up that task. But anyway, I hope that all of you, including the audience and the panelists, were able to understand the complexity of the security situation in East Asia and the importance of partnership, international partnership, to maintain and enhance the rules-based international order in response to the challenge posed by China and other powers. So once again, thank you very much for joining us today, and please join me in thanking the four excellent panelists. Thank you very much, and see you again. Goodbye. Thank you very much.